Hey kids, how you doing? Hey, today we are going to be reading about the very first time that American troops actually faced the German army. And oddly enough, it was not in a place that you would kind of expect that it normally would be, Germany or France or something like that. Eventually, the fighting was there, but that's not where it happened first. It actually happened in North Africa, the countries of Morocco, Tunisia. Earlier on, there had been fighting going on, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, and kind of that whole top area there in Africa along the Mediterranean Sea. And we're going to be reading about that and kind of how did Americans end up fighting Germans in a place like Tunisia eventually, and it actually starts with the Italians. So let's take a look at this, and if you could, please follow along while I read. Okay, World War II, the war in the Mediterranean, North Africa and Italy, Rome's new legions. Taking advantage of the chaos after World War I, Benito Mussolini and the fascists took power in Italy in the early 1920s. As the 1920s progressed, Mussolini became world famous for his progress getting Italy back on track economically. Fascist progress, though, came at the expense of individual rights. Despite his popularity, freedom gradually disappeared in Italy. And there you see a picture of something called the Balboa Monument. Okay, it's in the city of Chicago, and it's not. They don't make that big of a deal about it because that little monument there, that was a gift from Mussolini and fascist Italy in 1933 for the second Chicago World's Fair, called the Century of Progress. Now it's still there. Okay, this is a Roman column, so that's couple of thousand years old, that part of it. The bottom part kind of says that it's a gift from Italy to the city of Chicago. You see Soldier Field in the background, the Hancock Building back there. So yeah, if you go to a Bears game and you're kind of walking along the lake there, you're going to see this little thing. And like I said, they don't make a big deal about it because we don't really like advertising that we've got something from fascist Italy. But yeah, it was there. It was a gift. So yeah, it's still actually there. It's referred to as the Balboa Monument, which the Balboa was he was the Italian pilot who kind of came to that. And there's actually a street right on the other side of Soldier Field called Balboa. So there's these little links that most people don't even know to fascist Italy, but it's there. So yeah, if you ever see it, kind of take a look at it. It's all written in Latin, so you won't be able to understand what's actually carved on that stone, but you'll see the term fascisti in there, which is the Latin term for fascist. So anyway, moving on. As the world entered the 1930s, fascist Italy drew closer and closer to the new Nazi government in Germany. Within a few years, Mussolini was making aggressive threats of conquest, just like Adolf Hitler. Fascism on the march. 2,000 years ago, the Roman Empire controlled the entire area surrounding the Mediterranean Sea. Even in the 20th century, Italians referred to the Mediterranean as Mare Nostrum, which means our sea. In the first effort to recreate the ancient Rome in 1935, Mussolini invaded the African nation of Ethiopia, conquering it in a few short weeks. Then, for several years, Mussolini eagerly eyed Egypt. When France fell in 1940 and the British were fighting desperately against the Nazis, Mussolini decided the time was right to invade the British colony of Egypt. Italy invaded from Ethiopia as well as Libya, which was also under Italian control. At first, the Italians drove the undersupplied British back and threatened the port of Alexandria. Those of you who know Miss Rania, she's from Alexandria. Within a few weeks, though, the British regrouped, fought ferociously, and drove the Italians completely out of Egypt. And there you see kind of the desert fighting in 1940, right? You see guys, kind of rare. These guys are British SAS, which these are the very toughest guys that they've got, Special Air Service Regiment. And you see them with the long beards. Men typically did not wear beards in the 1940s, but these guys have been out in the desert for a while. So you won't see European men wearing beards too often, but these guys did, because when they went out in the desert, they stayed out there for weeks. Okay, that was their whole thing. The British Eighth Army looked to be on the verge of taking total control of the continent of Africa. The Italian army was in total retreat and surrendering by the thousands. Mussolini's dream of a new Roman Empire seemed to be dying before his eyes. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill began making plans to invade Europe through Greece once his forces had total control of the Mediterranean Sea. Before the British could finish off the Italians once and for all, they received very sobering news. The Germans were coming. The Desert Fox. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel made a name for himself as a tank commander in the German invasion of France in 1940. His unit, the 7th Panzer Division, was nicknamed the Ghost Division because it appeared and disappeared with lightning speed. Rommel was the perfect blitzkrieg commander, and the North African desert was perfect blitzkrieg fighting ground, wide open and flat. And there you see a picture of Rommel, who became world famous during this time. As quickly as the British had taken control of the North African battle, it was lost again and they were driven back into Egypt. Within days, the Germans threatened the Egyptian capital of Cairo, and Rommel was world famous. As tough as the Germans were, they never had very many men committed to the African campaign, and supplies were difficult to get to them. Libya was close to Italy, but the British Royal Navy and Air Force controlled the Mediterranean, and German or Italian transports rarely made it across the water unscathed. The Germans fought hard, but after threatening Cairo, they were stopped at the Battle of El Alamein and once again pushed out of Egypt. The Yanks are coming. Almost a year after the attack on Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Army had trained, equipped, and shipped enough men to invade the west coast of Africa in order to help the British in their fight against the Germans. American forces landed on the coast of Morocco in Operation Torch on November 8, 1942. Ironically, their enemy in Morocco was not Germans or Italians, but the French. When France fell in 1940, part of the country was left unoccupied by the Germans. The capital moved to the town of Vichy, and the French government began a period of uneasy cooperation with the Germans. France's North African colonies of Morocco, Algeria, and Tunisia were under Vichy control, and the Americans had no idea what to expect. Would the French fight or lay down their arms? It was widely known that many Frenchmen did not support Vichy, but those in charge might. As it turned out, some did obey Vichy orders, but most did not. The Americans were mostly unopposed in their landings and quickly swarmed into Morocco and Algeria. And there you see French soldiers on the train there. You can tell kind of by the style of their helmet. And then you've got American soldiers kind of shaking hands with them, sort of symbolizing the two countries coming back together after a brief period of not being friends. An army at dawn. When the Americans landed in Morocco and the French quickly joined forces with them, Adolf Hitler knew that Africa would eventually be lost. He instructed the Germans under Rommel to continue fighting, but also begin making plans to evacuate the continent of Africa and get back to defend Italy, which was the next logical place for the Allies to invade. And there you see the very famous Italian boot peninsula, because it looks like a boot. This is where after Africa, it's where the United States and Great Britain invaded next. In 1943, the Americans and British landed on the island of Sicily in Operation Husky. In response to the invasion, the Italian people rose up and toppled Benito Mussolini from power after 20 years of fascist government. While it seemed like the Italian campaign might go easily for the Allies after the fall of Mussolini, the Germans quickly took control of the territory the Italians once held. The Americans and British fought hard battles day after day against the Germans, slowly liberating each town and city. They never, though, were able to totally push the Germans out of Italy. Only Germany's surrender in 1945 ended Italy's fascist experience. So, we saw the invasion of North Africa as well as the invasion of Italy. And, kind of the original thought was, hey, that we can invade through Italy, push our way up through Italy, and then, liberate France and all these countries that the Germans had already occupied. And it never really worked out that way. We fought our way up that peninsula for a couple of years, but every inch was contested, and lots of mountains, very hard to move around there. So it never really turned into the way into Europe the way that we thought. That would come with the D-Day invasion that would be on June 6, 1944. So that's kind of what we've seen with our viewing of Band of Brothers. They participated in that part of things. So this happened before that. And then when Italy didn't really happen the way the Allies were hoping that it would, that's where they went. So we'll pick it up from there, talking about D-Day next, and that's where we are. Okay, take it easy.